tinsel has been packed away and the New Year's hangovers have hopefully receded, and what better time now to talk to landlords about getting into the property groove for 2017. There is no excuse, because here on Property Tribes we're delivering a whole month of content to inspire you towards a successful new year. And joining me now is Stephen Johnson, MD of Shawbrook Bank. And Stephen, I'm very interested to hear your views of what kind of issues landlords should be focusing on for 2017 to have a very successful and profitable year.
Yeah, I think maybe with looking from the finance hat on, I think it's important that landlords quickly come to terms with the changing affordability assessments that are taking place now. Now that we're in 2017, those standards applied from the end of last year, beginning of January this year, and that'll introduce more complexity for landlords, and they need to understand how that impacts their ability to finance and to gear. So I think as they're planning their strategies, I think having a good feel for actually what's fundable under the new standards will be key. Key to sort of some of those investment decisions they make, and a lot of the underwriting standards lend themselves to high yielding properties in terms of the ability to raise finance. So that may well influence some landlord strategies, whether it's about types of properties, about regional focus.
Yep.
So I think that will be my first observation, and I'm not sure how well the market is aware just yet, and many of the lenders have only just introduced those changes. So it will take some time, but I'd recommend people spend some time to understand what that means for them. And on a similar theme, my other piece of advice would be to be fully cognizant of the full impact of Section 24 and the interest tax relief changes on the economics and the cash flow for the landlord. So again, they're making decisions with their eyes wide open to what their actual cash flow is going to look like, as the tapering starts to kick in over the next 3 years. So they will be my two key bits of advice, I think. And there's quite a change happened in our industry around the affordability assessment. So spend a bit of time to understand those. Definitely.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, would you recommend that perhaps in January landlords have a talk with a mortgage broker? Because one of the aspects of the PRA is to look at a landlord's overall affordability based on how highly leveraged their portfolio is, and that some landlords may need to actually kind of take a step back before they could take a step forward, perhaps by selling a property and paying down some debt in order to be in a position to secure financing in 2017. So would a chat with the mortgage broker be a positive thing for them to do, to understand their position moving forwards with funding?
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, and I think it's always good to reflect and take stock of where you are, especially with the changing tax regimes, because what you think your kind of profit and loss looks like is changing. So yeah, I think that's absolutely good advice. Also, the market's seen quite a lot of liquidity flow in the back part of last year, which has manifested itself in cheaper rates. So there are some, whilst the affordability standards have got tighter, and therefore ultimately the ability to borrow has probably got tougher. They're actually pricing wise, it's been a lot of keen pricing entering the market. So there's probably some good opportunities to refinance and to get onto some slightly more competitive terms. So yeah, I think it's part of a health check, and I guess this time of year it's always good to sort of get a good handle on your portfolio and make some smart decisions.
Indeed. Which strategies do you think are going to be the highest yielding ones in 2017?
I think we're going to continue to see kind of a desire from investors and landlords to create value. I think making, I know this is, most landlords have always focused on the creation of value and more rentable space, or whatever strategy is going to achieve that, rather than necessarily buying a tailor-made finished buy-to-let. So I think that will continue to be in focus, because yield is everything. And the creation of that yield through some clever changes to a property configuration, or focusing on some slightly different assets, whether they be multi-lets, HMOs or semi-commercial, I think will become even more pertinent, because those types of properties are going to have more opportunity to finance and to gear, and therefore you can probably grow a bit quicker around some of those assets than you could in a mainstream lower yielding buy-to-let.
I think it'd be a good time to mention holiday lets, because we don't talk enough about holiday lets with Shawbrook, because you do offer holiday let products, don't you? And clearly they're not affected by Section 24, and we've got a lot of people coming to holiday in the UK because of the cheap pound, etc. So holiday lets could be something to look at in 2017.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of where there are kind of areas of the market that offer something slightly different. It is a different business, and you get seasonality, of cash flow. It's a different management. So, it's not the same thing as a passive investment on a straightforward AST. So people need to kind of be mindful of that. But many of the customers that we serve are full-time property professionals. So within their skill set, and it could suit their model quite well. Similarly, we've seen an increasing look at sort of commercial property assets as landlords have thought about, well, actually I can get a good yield. The interest tax relief again doesn't apply, so that's helpful. And with permitted development rights as well, a lot of landlords have been buying some of those assets with a view to thinking, well, actually there may be a development option down the road. Not necessarily knowing, there's just good optionality for them really, but it's a standalone good investment producing a good yield and a good profit. So again, I think you could see a continuation of people looking at those mixed use and commercial asset classes as well.
So I guess we could say that as 2017 gets underway, we are going to see the kind of era of the amateur landlord fade away, and we're going into more the era of the professional landlord. And do you agree that landlords need to be kept, need to make sure they're educated, to understand what's happening, be aware of things coming down the pipe?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a dynamic industry. Obviously we saw with the autumn statement references to changing letting fees, so that'll have an impact on landlords' models and investors' model around the quality of the tenants they're taking into their properties. So there's always things happening in our industry, isn't there? And I think, investing in knowledge and learning and sort of keeping up with developments and opportunities, absolutely. I think that's key, and I think, there's always something that's changing to sort of understand really, and trying to figure out how it impacts either future investment strategies or your existing portfolio.
And do check out Shawbrook's YouTube channel as well, because they've got a lot of videos on there for landlord education purposes, and I will put a link below this to take you there if you want to go and have a look at some of Shawbrook's video content for landlords. I think just to finish then, Stephen, I see that we're going to have 3 tiers of landlords in 2017, which is quite unusual because they're all going to have different agendas and different issues. The 3 tiers I see as the unencumbered landlord who's not affected by Section 24, the incorporated landlord who's less affected, and finally the highly leveraged sole trader landlord that is going to potentially be hugely affected. These 3 different landlords are going to have different needs and different ways of dealing with things, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, and they may be in a different position. So if you're an unencumbered landlord, actually, you're in a position to grow right now, and you can do so. If you're a highly leveraged landlord, actually, you may be preoccupied with trying to deleverage ahead of the tax changes. So that may have an impact on, actually the supply of property into the market as well. I know we've spoken about this offline actually in regards to kind of how that might affect rentals and where the landlords strike their kind of rental aspirations. The problem is, are landlords price setters or price takers? It may all very well be well and good to say, actually, because I'm a highly leveraged landlord and I'm owning my own name, my costs are higher, therefore I'm going to charge you more rent. But actually, if there's lots of supply of property at an equivalent level at a different rent, then you're going to get a void. Or alternatively, you may get a tenant who can't quite afford it, and therefore starts going to arrears for you, which can be a terrible outcome in terms of getting kind of possession of the property back and so forth. So I think you're right to identify that you've got different landlords with different costs now. I would kind of question whether that would reflect itself completely in rents that they pass on to the market, because the market will determine what rents are sustainable in that area. But it's a new dynamic, definitely.
It is, and I think the Section 24 highly leveraged sole trader landlord is probably the most exposed to risk by a long shot, and I think we'll see some interesting developments in that regard.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and obviously people have said, we've done our own surveys, and most landlords said, we're going to put up rents firstly, secondly, we're going to potentially sell some assets. But, you can only put rents up if people can afford them, and sometimes that isn't always an appropriate solution. So, yeah, I think it's just making sure that people are aware. I mean, for example, we've done some analysis of the customers that we've lent to over the last 6-7 years. A number of those now on our own analysis, look actually like they're slightly going to be, would find it difficult in the new tax regime in terms of actually having enough cash to service the loan. So, we started communicating with those customers. Now, things change, people's personal income, other sources of income change, obviously, and people have options, but the important thing is that they're aware that they may have an issue and therefore can choose an appropriate course rather than sort of burying your head in the sand, or not knowing, and then getting a shock when your tax bill arrives on your doorstep.
So just really, Stephen, to finish, your number one bit of advice for landlords for 2017?
Understand the new underwriting regime and how that affects your ability to raise finance, because I think you can't really make your investment strategies until you understand your ability to finance them. But before you do that, make sure you haven't got a problem in your existing portfolio when the tax relief changes kick in.
Well, fantastic advice there. Thank you very much. And can I take this opportunity to wish you and everybody at Shawbrook a very happy new year, and thank you for your continued support of landlord education via Property Tribes. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Very much.